don't know how to go about finding them. My dad won't tell me who they are, but he has told me that the floating city kid is still alive.
This one might not be the scariest, but it always freaked me out the most as a kid. Be me. Live quite close to the beach. Really beautiful beach, but I hate it cause it has a blue hole. If you don't know, blue holes are massive marine sinkholes. Basically giant, seemingly bottomless holes normally off the coast. Anyway, this beach was perfect in every way except it had a small blue hole a few meters out from the main swimming area. Wasn't very wide, probably only like 15 meters across, but insanely deep. You can't see the bottom even on a sunny day when the water's clear. I always tried to avoid it cause it literally just fades into total darkness and my child brain always imagines Lovecraftian monsters at the bottom. The tide pulled me out over it when I was swimming once and I refused to go back in the water for like 6 months afterwards. One day I'm having dinner with my family at a local pub and one of my dad's friends comes over and talks to everyone. My brother tells him about how scared I am of it and tries to make fun of me. Dad's friend says, "It's good to be afraid of that hole. The crayfish lives in there." What now? My mother overhears and shushes my dad's friend, tells him not to scare us so close to bed. Later on my brother asks him when our parents aren't around. He's reluctant at first but eventually tells us that there's been sightings of a giant crayfish in the waters around the beach and the stories say that he probably lives in the hole. Some people even say that he made the hole by burrowing right into the seabed. This is enough to mess me up for years, but my brother tells him to go on cause he can tell it's freaking me out. Dad's friend tells us that his cousin was fishing on the beach years ago and saw what looked like 2 giant palm trees without any branches stretching out the water. They swayed in the air for a while before getting sucked back down. Cousin says he thinks those were the antennae. We go home soon after, but my brother keeps retelling me the story and adding new details every time. At some point the shipwreck became part of the story's main canon. There was a huge shipwreck near that beach a few years earlier. I remember because it was a cargo ship and the whole town turned out to steal the salvageable shoes and sandals that washed up on the beach. My brother says the ship actually got attacked by the crayfish and dragged towards the hole. Obviously anything living in a hole that size wouldn't be nearly big enough to fuck with a cargo ship, but I was a kid so I was gullible as fuck. It must have been some kind of local legend because when I told it at a sleepover one time a bunch of other kids started talking about all the version they had heard. Apparently the crayfish had pulled down lots of ships over the years and any surfers or divers who swam directly over the hole.
That's all of mine, so here's the ones I saved from the last thread. There was a really fucked up urban legend around my hometown, Chesapeake, Virginia, when I was growing up. It went something like, one day, a military plane flew over the woods and dropped something big out as they went by. Some stories say it was a UFO. Over the next few weeks people say they start seeing a really pale white horse galloping around, but they never see the full thing, just its back legs and glimpses of it as it runs away. Eventually some teenagers go out into the woods to find it, but eventually they give up and just start drinking the beers they took with them. One teen needs to take a piss, so he walks off a little. As he's out there he notices a white shape peeking at him from behind a tree in the distance. It's a mannequin's head. He freaks out a bit but starts thinking it's just his friends fucking with him. He calls out to them, but then he hears them answer from behind him back where they were drinking. The mannequin head slowly moves from behind the tree and foliage, and the teen sees that the mannequin head is attached to a horse's body. It's not a mannequin's head, it's a human head with all the features covered over with skin, so it looks like a mannequin head. The head is connected to a huge, pale horse. Some stories said it was see-through and he could make out its organs and stuff, others just say it was white and veiny with a huge belly like it was pregnant. Teen runs home with friends close behind him, and needless to say we never fucked around deep in those wooded locations in Thailand and got told a freaky one. They say that when you're alone at night you may come across a short, fat, hairy man who waddles around in the shadows. He calls you by your name and asks you to come closer, all the while he's breathing laboriously. When you get up close you realize that he is not human but actually a large black pig wearing a black top hat and a black and red waistcoat that's barely stretched around his chest. They say he has a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, so most people immediately run away, but if you stick around and talk to him he will answer one question about your future if you agree to tell him your full name. I always thought that was a weird bargain, maybe the translation to English didn't quite work. After the bombing of Hiroshima many people were still alive, however they were often blinded by the flash and suffering from full-body burns. They began to grope their way through the city and ended up forming a long procession of shambling, blind, moaning husks begging for someone who could see to lead them to someone who could help. The skin began to peel off in long strands and they walked with their hands stretched out to guide themselves, and because they couldn't bear the pain of the burned skin on their arms touching the URNT skin of their bodies, from a distance the strands of skin hanging from their hands made them look like zombies with long twisted claws. Many died as they marched along the road away from the city. A local urban legend says that on some nights you can see this procession walking through the hills outside the city. In front of them are seemingly healthy people who look like they've been drained of life. These are the people who went out at night to see them and were caught by the ghosts and now are being forced to lead them.
OP here. Once again, thanks to everyone who contributed. Without you, /x/ is nothing. I'll share a personal story now. This is all from memory, so it'll be a rough sketch. It's not really about me though, but about my friend, Elijah. Grow up in East Texas. I'm a small kid and a bookworm, which makes me kind of an outcast in elementary. No friends. Feels badman.jpg. In 6th grade I meet Elijah. His family is from Louisiana and he's super Cajun. Uses French words all the time, has a funny accent, and is a great storyteller. He's also athletic and a good-looking kid, so he's pretty popular. Somehow we get along great. He tells me all about his grandfather, Papa, who apparently gets a lot of sick people visiting him all the time. Papa prays over them and heals them. This sounded like some X-Men shit to my young brain, so I was fascinated. Fast forward to the summer after 6th grade. Elijah's going back to Louisiana to visit family. Since I have no other friends, I spend the summer reading. He comes back in August and invites me over to his house, says he has to tell me something important about Papa. Hell yet, more X-Men stories. When I show up, Elijah tells me that Papa passed on the healing powers to him. Not gonna lie, I was kinda jealous when he said this. I wanted to be an X-Man. Why not me? Papa told me that he's going to die soon, and he needed to pass on the healing to someone. Normally a man passes it on to a young girl, and a woman passes it on to a young boy, but Papa broke the rule because he couldn't find anybody to pass it on to. Apparently nobody wants to be a healer anymore because it's a very hard life. They aren't allowed to charge money because it's against tradition, so they just have to rely on the kindness of those they heal. Most people go to them because they can't afford doctors, so they normally don't pay anything. Most healers are very poor as a result. We'll continue. Show me the power, I say. I can't. I can only use it if someone is sick and needs it, but I'll tell you how I got it. Papa brought Elijah into a room, just the two of them, and Elijah memorized a bunch of prayers in French. As Elijah's memorizing them, it feels like someone gently forces him off his chair and down to his knees. He feels his arms being lifted up high above his head, and a warm feeling fills his body. He lowers his head, almost afraid. He turns his hands so they're palm side up and something that feels like warm liquid pours into them. Elijah thinks Papa is pouring warm water into his hands at first, but he turns his head slightly and sees him still sitting a few feet away. After a while, the feeling goes away and Elijah stands back up. Papa says, "Now you have the power." Fast forward to later that day. A neighbor woman showed up with her crying child. He fell and broke his leg. Papa tells Elijah to use a certain prayer while laying his hands on the boy's broken leg. Elijah starts feeling the same warmth as before all throughout his body. This time the warmth quickly goes into his hands and they feel like they're burning. Elijah prays until he feels the burning leave his hands and the boy is no longer both and gives Papa a bowl of rice. After I heard this, I used to bug Elijah all the time about showing me his healing power, but he always refused. I began to suspect that it was just one of his stories, but then something happened just before he moved away. Can't. 8th grade gym class. The coach is in his office not paying attention as usual while the kids play basketball. Elijah's team is winning, and I'm just sitting on the bleachers reading when I hear a scream. I look up. Holy fuck! One of the kids is on the floor holding his leg. It's snapped at the shin. Never seen anything like that in person, can't look away. Everyone is freaking out and Elijah pushes them all back and kneels next to the kid. He places his hand on the kid's leg as the kid is screaming. Oh shit, X-Men time. Coach is hurrying over at this point. I get up off the bleachers and run over when suddenly,